What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we are gonna check out the PRS MT15. Let's do it! Alright, hope you guys are doing great out there today. This amp has been extremely heavily requested pretty much since I started the channel, and I totally understand why, because this, in my opinion, is the best of the lunchbox sized heads out there. Now there are a number of reasons for that, and it kind of comes down to trade-offs. So tonally, I think this thing is awesome. It is very reminiscent of the PRS Archon 50, which I did a demo a while back on my channel. It seems to sit somewhere between a 2-channel dual rectifier and a 5150. And what I mean by that is there are characteristics of this amp that kind of fall into either the dual rectifier or the 5150 category to me. Now the MT15 compared to the Archon 50, the MT15 actually seems a little bit more aggressive to me. The Archon 50 is very smooth, whereas the MT15 seems to have a little bit more kind of like upper mid aggression to it. It seems to be a little bit brighter overall, and the Archon 50 is very smooth across the board. You really have to crank the mids and the treble to kind of get a super aggressive sound out of it. It's very smooth, very low mid based. This one has a very similar voicing, but the mids seem based a little bit higher, so you're not getting so much of that lower mid kind of like throaty grunt, if that makes any sense. This one pushes a little bit more towards, I would say, a 5150 style voicing. It's got a little bit more upper mid cut and roundness to it, whereas the Archon 50, just as I've already said before, has more of a low mid based voicing. Now in feel, this amp is very saturated, very saturated. It feels a little bit more saturated than the Archon does. The Archon can be dry depending on how you dial it, but once you really start pushing the gain on the Archon, it kind of, it starts to feel a little bit more liquid. It feels very easy to play under the fingers, especially when you start to hit it with a boost, which of course I had my Deadwell duality on in that intro clip, as I always do. Yeah, the amp is just very easy to play. Now this amp, I have actually used this amp for a show before, back when, you know, shows actually happened. I used it in conjunction with my 5150 50 watt, and this amp hung with that no problem. We were in a mic setting, so I didn't really have to push it, but I was standing in front of the cab where my 5150 was coming out of, and on the other side, all the way on the other side of the stage, the PRS MT15 was coming through that cab, and I could still hear it just fine. This amp definitely hangs in a band setting, no problem. It sounds fantastic. I'm a big fan of the voicing. I'm a big fan of it being a lunchbox size head with full-size tubes. That's what really sets this thing apart for me, guys. I kind of like the EVH LBX, the original, a little bit more tonally, because I think that the actual original LBX sounds really, really good for a lunchbox style amp. This one, not quite as good. There's not quite as much string clarity there. I mean, this is all subjective to me. This is all my opinion, so, you know, you guys may feel differently, and that's fine. I'm just giving you my kind of take on it. But this amp sounds very, very good, gets loud, and doesn't compress under volume all that much. Also, everybody tells me it's got a beautiful clean. I'm not gonna mess with that because I am Thrash Damon, and this is Belligerent Amateur Power Chord Central, and we don't do cleans. So anyways, I'm gonna do as I always do. I'm gonna shut up because I'm already talking too long. We're gonna dial this thing back to noon. on all the settings on the gain channel. I'm going to put the gain at 9 o'clock. I'm going to turn my boost off. Now this amp has been known for being noisy. As it sits right now, I am getting some noise through the speakers, but it is not that bad, okay? I did have one before that seemed to struggle a little bit with noise coming through the speakers and just the amp feeding back and stuff like that. They were kind of notorious for that for a while. This is a newer one and it sounds great. So yeah, let's dive into this amp and how it sounds with everything on noon, 9 o'clock on the gain. Before we do that real quick, if this is your guys' first time here at my channel, what I do is I take awesome high gain amps, big and small, overdrive pedals, guitars, pickups. I even shoot out cabs. I take the unprocessed audio and I give it to you guys for you to really see how this thing sounds without any post-processing or editing done to the audio and give you the most kind of real world feel for how the amp sounds that I possibly can. If that is something that you guys are into, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button after you watch this video and consider subscribing on your way out. It really helps me a lot and I would love to have you guys keep coming back for the next ones. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's see how the amp sounds. Alright, so not too bad. It's pretty muffled to start off. I think a lot of that has to do with the presence, so let's bring the presence up to 9 o'clock. Alright, that's better. Honestly, it sounds pretty good with everything at noon. Presence pushed up to kind of pull the blanket off the speakers a little bit. It's not bad at all. Honestly, that's a pretty good low gain sound for a more modern voiced amplifier. That sounds nice to me. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I am playing my Gibson Les Paul Custom today with a Duncan full shred in the bridge. Just so you guys know, taking a little break from the Voodoo custom stuff because I'm going to be installing my signature pickup prototype in a guitar here very shortly. So we're going to mix it up for a couple days before we start messing around with that thing. But anyways, let's push the gain up a little bit more on this. Get a little bit more noise through the speakers, so that tells me we're going to get a pretty nice gain increase. We're already in high gain territory very easily. That sounds fantastic. This amp is huge in the low end for being a small amp, but it's also tight. So let's actually pull the bass back a little bit. Let's pull the mids up and see how that sounds. All right, so that sounds pretty good as well. Still a little on the dry side. Let's add a little bit more saturation. We're just under noon on the gain knob. All right, so we're sounding pretty good. Let's actually roll those mids back and pull the treble up and see how that sounds. All right, now that's giving me some serious rectifier vibes. Let's actually push the presence up a little bit more, give it some of that top end sizzle like you get from a recto. Not bad. That sounds pretty good. Let's turn the bass down a little bit more, treble up a little bit, and mids up a little bit. It's a little bit too bright up top. Pull that treble back a little bit. Awesome. Man, this sounds really good, guys. Seriously, really, really good. It is, for me, for my personal taste, missing a little bit of that upper mid presence that really makes the amp seem alive. So we're gonna kick on a boost and see how it sounds. All right, so my go-to is my Deadwell Duality DX. We are on the Tube Screamer side. Let's see how that sounds. Nothing else has changed other than me kicking a boost on. That's the immediate difference for me. It's much like when you hit a Mesa, just about a Mesa anything with a boost out front, it really brings things alive for that high gain sound. So we're gonna pull the gain back a little bit, and we're gonna pull the bass back up to noon and see how that sounds. All right, pretty good. It's still a little bit sizzly up top, so let's pull that presence back a little bit. Yeah, this amp rules. It sounds really good in the room. I'm gonna actually pull that gain back a little bit more because it's a little bit too saturated for my taste, but it does sound really good at this point. Oh, yeah, that is super, super nice. What I really like about that tone right now is I'm getting a big but punchy low end. A lot of people kind of give me crap in the comments, and that's fine. Everybody has their own ear. But me, I like a good amount of bass. I like a good amount of low end. It's all about how it reacts. If the bass is very big and punchy and full, but quick, as in that speaker excursion comes back kind of quickly, and it really lends itself to fast, powerful palm muting without the low end kind of getting stuck in the middle where you can tell it just hasn't had a chance for the low end to kind of do its thing, come out and come back. Like a rectifier or an Ubershaw, when you chug really fast on those, unless you have it set up just right, that low end is kind of, that note is still blooming while you're trying to get into the next note, and it just makes the low end sound a little bit sloppy. Now here, we've got a very punchy low end. It's big. There's a lot of good frequencies going on there, but it's also a quick low end. So it reacts well to picking fast with your hand. I'm actually going to bump the low end a little bit more, and I'm going to bump the middle a little bit more. Yeah, and that's a really nice tone. I'm really digging what I hear right now. It sounds fantastic through this Mesa cab, through the V30s. I would use this, no hesitation, for a show, for sure. It sounds great. All right, so that's the dead weld. Not everybody has a dead weld lying around, although you should probably get one because they're rad. Let's turn on a basic tube screamer and see how the amp sounds with a tube screamer out front. Still good, it still sounds great. It's just the upper mids are a little bit spikier and it takes out a little bit more low end. and there's not as much clarity, but it sounds great in front of this. If you want to boost it with a basic tube screamer, it's gonna sound fantastic. Let's kick on my old favorite. I'm kicking on my old favorite, the MXR M77 Custom Badass Modified, and let's see how that does on this amp. Okay, so in my opinion, this pedal actually does not suit this amp as well because the mids are rounder in the modified OD and the mids in this amp are kind of round. It doesn't have any like pointy frequencies that stick out like a Marshall or even, you know, certain PVs do. So when you combine a pedal that gives you round mids with an amp that gives you round mids, it makes it sound a little bit congested in my opinion. Let's go back to the dead weld one more time. That's just perfect. That sounds, sounds really good. Alright guys, so real quick, I'm actually going to switch to a guitar that is in drop C for a little bit lower tuning because a lot of people are going to want to use this for lower tunings. I don't think I've ever even featured this guitar on this channel yet. This is my oldest guitar, my Gibson Les Paul Studio that has had 2 headstock breaks and is still one of my favorite guitars in the world. Alright guys, so we are in drop C now. Let's hear how this amp sounds in drop C. Alright, so this amp actually sounds even better to me in drop tuning than it does in regular. Let's bump those mids a little bit more, bring that bass back just a tad. Alright guys, so one last riff in drop C and then we'll call it a day, but man, this amp sounds absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend you picking up one of these if you're looking at them. Alright guys, that's going to do it for me on the PRS MT15 today. I hope that you guys enjoyed the demo and I hope that it was helpful. I really think that it is one of the best of the lunchbox amps out there, and for me, it's really the only one that I would consider owning long term because I can actually use it in a band setting, whereas all the other ones are going to fall apart because they have those EL84 power tubes and small power sections. This one pushes some serious volume and air without the amp falling apart, and it sounds absolutely killer for high gain tones, and the cleans are beautiful too, but that's not really important to me. So yeah, I highly recommend this amp. Again, hope that this was helpful. If you guys like this video, please hit the like button on your way out. Consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. Kyle here again. We'll see you guys soon.